It's a terrific definition, but I would like to add that character is also what you do when people are watching. And right now, fortunately or unfortunately, due to the current presidential race, our children, parents, friends, coworkers are watching and listening and talking, sometimes with each other, but oftentimes to or at or past one another. Again, my name is David Snyder. I am the Executive Director of the Jewish Community Relations Council of Southern New Jersey. We are responsible for the public relations, social advocacy, general community relations on behalf of the Jewish community for the Jewish Federation. Anybody here familiar with the Jewish campus, Crescent and Springdale Road, known as the JCC for most people? Excellent. So we're one of those agencies within that complex. I always talk about, we have this fancy mission statement that talks about fostering relationships and making sure that, all faiths and religions work together. I have my own kind of explanation. I say all the time that we're looking to make sure that South Jersey remains and continues to be a great place to raise a Jewish family, send a Jewish child to school, work as a Jewish person in an employer or within a school district. And then I pause and I say, and black kids and Latino families and people of all races, all faiths, all ethnicities. I mean, that's the bottom line. We have to be supportive in working together, one with the other. I threw a few quotes in here from Elie Wiesel, who many of you may know, a famous Holocaust survivor who just recently passed away. And he has said in the past, "Wherever men and women are persecuted because of their race, religion, or political views, that place must, at that moment, become the center of the universe." So Matt, kudos to you for making this the center of the universe as a result of some incidents that have occurred and the importance of just, again, coming together, dialoguing, talking, and sharing thoughts and ideas. I want to mention that as part of my responsibilities, I oversee a local Holocaust museum. I'm giving you the official name. It's the Esther Robb Holocaust Museum and Goodwin Education Center. For anyone not familiar, at the end of tonight, I have some flyers in the back about an event we have upcoming. My business card is there, but we provide one-on-one guided tours of this facility, but mostly we bring in groups of young people, of disadvantaged youth. We do teacher education trainings. We have lots of elected officials come in and just take advantage of what happens to be, and I'm going to get to it in a moment, just some very unique people in our community. I will say that I don't profess to be an expert in knowing how to explain the long-term negative impact, not only to individuals but also to communities, when intolerance, prejudice, and racism is provided ample room to fester. But I am incredibly fortunate to work with many special souls who are. That's what I was alluding to here. That throughout the year, we coordinate the opportunities for local Holocaust survivors to speak to school children, youth groups, civic organizations, with the singular hope that by hearing their personal story, or that of a child or grandchild of a local Holocaust survivor, even one person in the audience will take an extra moment to think about what they say, how they act, and ultimately what they believe about another person they may actually know very little about. So I'm going to share with you one experience. We're told to, maybe have a story. And this just occurred a couple days ago. In my role, I had the unique experience of attending the behind-the-scenes tour of the new Mormon church opening up in Philadelphia. 2 questions. Anybody else has been on that tour? And anybody here a Mormon? Okay, my remarks don't change. I just was curious. If you're not familiar, as I wasn't, marriage within the Mormon church is not only for time here on earth, but for eternity. It was fascinating to me, but not in the way you might think. I'm just being honest. I could not wrap my head around the strongly held belief that 2 people who met and lived together while alive were eternally bound together. I have to note that I've been happily married for 22 years, but I am confident my wife would have put like a 100-year cap for sure on our arrangement. So here's where my mind was going while I'm on that tour, thinking ahead to tonight's conversation with all of you. What if, rather than, again, thinking, eternally, we were thinking that we lived, each day was, in essence, our last, or the most important day of our lives? How would we interact and engage with our friends, our neighbors, our coworkers, our children? If you keep that in mind, I believe the world would be a little bit different of a place. So I just mentioned that as a kind of a marker. Again, another Elie Wiesel quote: "Someone who hates one group will end up hating everyone, and ultimately hating himself or herself." So again, I want to thank Matt for putting this panel together. I'm impressed by my esteemed, I'll say, fellow panelists, and truly looking forward to a engaging conversation with all of you after we're done with our intros. So thank you again for having me.
Jim DeSimone from PFLAG Collingswood.
Thank you. Again, the applause before I speak. That's a little intimidating and scary. So I didn't necessarily prepare any speech or anything to say, but I wanted to first introduce to you myself. I am Jim DeSimone. I'm the Vice President of PFLAG Collingswood. I will talk about what PFLAG Collingswood is in just a moment. But by day, I'm an educator. I spent 8 years working as a teacher in the Camden City School District, and now I work for the Department of Education at the state level here in New Jersey, Division of Early Childhood. That has absolutely nothing to do with my work with PFLAG, though. But just to give you a little background on who this is standing in front of you. So to touch a little bit closer to my work with PFLAG, I am an out gay man. I am cisgender, which means that I identify as the gender with which I was born. As opposed to being transgender. So the reason that PFLAG exists, originally it was actually an acronym. It stood for Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays. It no longer stands for that, but we've kept the name because of name recognition, branding. But the reason it no longer stands for that is that we don't just support the Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays. As a matter of fact, the majority of our new membership is supporting people who are dealing with gender identity issues, whether they're children or they themselves, or sometimes it's even spouses are transgender, or even just gender non-conforming, which could mean that individuals don't identify as one gender or the other. So we meet monthly in Collingswood at the Collingswood Community Center, the fourth Monday of the month at 6:30 in the evening. You're welcome to join us. And what our meetings consist of is often we will have a speaker begin the meeting, and then we will move into support groups. We've been around for, I want to say, about 5 or 6 years, and initially we started that we had one monthly support group together. And when we first started, we were mostly supporting families who were dealing with their children who were lesbian, gay, or bisexual. I would say a couple of years into our existence, we started to notice a lot more families coming with the gender identity concerns. So we started splitting up our support groups. So we actually have 2 support groups going concurrently. One is dealing with sexual orientation, the other deals with gender identity. At first, especially those of us who were dealing with sexual orientation thought it was fine to have one support group. We didn't recognize that there was a need for a second support group because we felt as though so many of our things were common, or so many of the things that we're dealing with were common. But one of the things that we learned is that there are whole other sets of issues that people who are transgender have to deal with, that those of us who are lesbian, gay, or bisexual do not have to deal with. I did some research, looked at some statistics. I won't bore you with too many of those, but there is a disproportionate amount of violence against transgender people, particularly transgender women of color. The majority of murders of transgender people have been of transgender women of color. It's a very disproportionate issue that affects those populations most. So what I'm getting at, though, as far as what the needs are, of course, there's the violence issue that, of course, we all have to deal with violence. Anybody in the LGBTQ community has to deal with or be concerned about violence. But there are a whole host of issues that go along with the transition process for someone who is transgender. And when I say the transition process, that is the coming out process for someone who's transgender. Moving from the sex that they were assigned at birth and moving into the gender with which they identify. There are medical issues, there are legal issues that go along with it. There are issues around health care. In the state of New Jersey, we're fortunate that we have a lot of very progressive laws that protect us. We have laws that protect us from hate crimes. They protect us from basically any sorts of discrimination, whether it's in housing or in education settings. And there, of course, are also national protections. But what I have realized in New Jersey that is lacking is we do not necessarily provide health care for people who are transgender. The majority of healthcare providers throughout the state don't have any experience with working with someone who is transgender. And I would say that majority don't even have much expertise or experience with working with people who are lesbian, gay, or bisexual, or maybe the health issues that may come along with that. Healthcare related to transitioning is generally not covered by health insurance. It's not considered a medical necessity by most insurance providers. There's also an issue in New Jersey when it comes to someone who is transgender. They cannot change the gender on their, or the sex on their birth certificate until they've had surgery. And a lot of people would probably look at that and think that's fine. Why would that be in question? But surgery isn't for everyone. And there are many reasons why surgery might not be for everyone. It may be for medical reasons, it may be for financial reasons, because surgery is incredibly expensive. And as I mentioned, it's not necessarily covered by healthcare. So for someone who is transgender and can't afford that surgery, or for personal reasons chooses not to have it, in New Jersey they can't change their gender, they can't identify legally as the gender with which they do identify. So there are still places for us to grow and move in New Jersey. I do want to share PFLAG's vision and mission statements. I think it's helpful to share those. So our vision is PFLAG envisions a world where diversity is celebrated and all people are respected, valued, and affirmed, inclusive of their sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. And our mission statement has 3 prongs. So the first prong is around support. We offer support for families, allies, and individuals who are LGBTQ. And that happens at our monthly support group meetings. That happens via phone and email. We occasionally receive phone calls or emails from people who need support. And we have a network of people within our organization that we try to pair people up with if they need more individualized attention. But people are welcome to come to our support group meetings for support. Our second prong is education, and that's for ourselves and others about the unique issues and challenges facing people who are LGBTQ. Hopefully that's something that I can offer tonight to all of you. But that's something that we do on a regular basis. Often we will speak at events such as this. We have an event coming up at a prison down in Cumberland County where we have been asked to speak to the entire staff of the prison to talk about the LGBTQ experience and what sorts of supports they can offer there. We're speaking in a few months at a GSA forum, which GSA, for those of you who don't know, is a Gay Straight Alliance. It is also, I just learned, becoming an acronym. Instead of Gay Straight Alliance, it's the Gender Sexuality Alliance. I think the idea is to make that more inclusive of everyone rather than it just being gay and straight. So we will be speaking at that to present to students who are there. That's at Perth Amboy High School coming up in November. So we do as much outreach or education as we can. And then lastly, we advocate in our communities to change attitudes and to create policies and laws that achieve full equality for people who are LGBTQ. I will say at the local level, that's not something we engage in too deeply. That's something that happens very much at the national level. So the structure of PFLAG is that there's PFLAG National, and that is the organization, the umbrella under which we operate. Locally, we have PFLAG Collingswood, and we are the local chapter that does the support and education here locally. There's also a local chapter in Philadelphia, PFLAG Philadelphia, and the 2 chapters work closely together, but we service different populations because of geography. So I'm not here as an expert necessarily. I'm hopefully here as somebody who can offer some insight. And I think that I imagine that everyone who is here because they have open ears, and that's what I would encourage, is open ears to listen and try to understand and show compassion to other people's experiences. I think being transgender is something that I couldn't even personally begin to imagine, and I think that's probably the case for many of us, and I would say that's probably a place from which a lot of people's misunderstandings or lack of understandings come. But someone who is transgender wakes up every day in a body that doesn't match who they believe they are inside. Oh, okay. Oh, sure. I tend to go fast. So, so I just hope that this is the beginning of listening, of opening up our eyes and ears to thinking about things that maybe we are not so familiar with. So thank you.
Reverend Alice Cook.
Good evening, everyone. I want to thank Matt, first of all, for inviting me. I am Reverend Alice Cook, and I am pastor of a little church here in Haddon Township. It's Rhodes Temple United Methodist Church. It's at 504 Rhodes Avenue. It's right up MacArthur Drive to Rhodes Avenue. You make a right, and we're the second building on the left. It's located in a little hamlet called Sadlertown. Sadlertown is located, like I said, in Haddon Township in Westmont, but it's a little 2 to 3 block area called Sadlertown because it was founded by an ex-slave whose name was Joshua Sadler. And that was he founded it, I should say, in 1842. Actually, in May the 3rd, 1842. And since then, it has been designated a historical site, not by the state as yet, but locally. It had, and the mayor of Haddon Township also came. We have a Sadlertown Day. Can you hear me? We have a Sadlertown Day every third Saturday in September. It's free, it's open to the public. If you want to know the history of Sadlertown itself, then come to our Sadlertown Day. We have games, we have food, and it's free. Now, within Sadlertown is Rhodes Temple United Methodist Church. Now, Rhodes Temple was built by Quakers, Charles and Beulah Rhodes. And they built it because at that day and time, it was real segregation. And the colored people in Sadlertown had to walk all the way over to Haddonfield or Grove Street to school, and they had no place of worship. So Charles and Beulah Rhodes built this 2-story building. The first was to be a Bible school on the first floor. No, I'm sorry, second floor was to be a Bible school, and the first floor was to be a day school for the children. So that was founded in 1893. Now, the church that I pastor it's both black and white, mostly black, but we do have some white parishioners also. Now, I think Matt invited me because a couple years ago, in fact, I think it was 2012, and it was on Mother's Day, there was a racial incident, not on the church, but on the lot. There was a car that received graffiti. There was a house in the area also with graffiti, racial graffiti. And in the street was also racial graffiti. In fact, and the car next to the church, it also received graffiti. Now, coming from church, we saw it and called the police. It took a little while for them to come. And once they came, they did not take a report or do anything. So I called the media. And that got their attention. And as far as I know, the culprit was, I don't know what happened to the culprit. I think he was turned over to his parents because it was a juvenile. Now, just a little bit of information here. And this information I got because it was an assignment, but the racial composition in this area within a 3-mile radius, Asians, there is 3.8% of Asians. Afro-Americans, there are 13.1%. Hispanic/Latino is 10.6%. Native Americans, 0.3%. Pacific Islanders, 3.8%. Anglo-white, 76.3%. Multiracial, 2.1%. And other, 4.4%. So the majority within this area are white, and we're still in the minority. There's still a resistance to accepting one another as human individuals with the right to live and let live. And I believe that this is Matt's objective in this particular forum, to talk, to give feelings about us all living together. Because who said that we are a mixture here? You know, America is supposed to be a melting pot. And with change, and there's always been change, change will continue. But people are resistant to change. And there's always a resistance to change because people like the status quo, like they were. What are you doing here? You have no business here. You're different. Well, I'm a preacher, so I'm going to stop.
Nobody should have to follow that. And Michelle, I'm sorry, it's you. Michelle Messer is a Haddon Township resident and a certified school psychologist.
Whew. Well, that's a tough act to follow. Hi, everyone, and welcome. So glad to be here tonight. And Matt, thanks again for, creating this opportunity for us all to get together to talk about these issues. This kind of was born of, we have the Haddon Township Facebook page here in town. I'm sure many of us are familiar with that. So we know that a lot of times that's giving people the opportunity to share their gripes and concerns. We've had some incidents of late, and I think collectively we kind of understand that it's not enough to want things to be different. We have to act. So that's why we're all here. I live in town, but I do work in Philadelphia in the school district as a school psychologist, where I've been there for 15 years. I'm also a member of the Philadelphia ACEs Task Force, which is an organization of kind of cross-disciplinary people working to address the effects of chronic stress in our communities. I'm also the founder of Safe Hearts, Open Minds, which is a trauma-informed education initiative, and the co-leader of the National Association of School Psychologists Trauma and Maltreatment Group. So I'm into safety. So it's my mission to create safety for our children and families, for the goal of developing kind of the best citizens our kids can be. In a school capacity, what I focus on is helping school staff and parents establish psychological safety. So there's a lot of variables that we can't control in Philadelphia, but what we can control is how we interact with one another. And what I want to help teachers and families do is have a deeper understanding of how to engage with each other for the purposes of creating safe environments so people can just kind of be. So psychological safety doesn't mean that we all have to be friends. It just means that we kind of need people to recognize humanity in a respectful way so that we all kind of feel seen and heard. This is not a need that's unique to me. It's not a need that's unique to you, but this is a universal need that we all need to recognize. It's a basic human need. It's not dependent on race, gender, sexual orientation, or ethnicity. And if you're a member of a minority, this safety is often challenged. We all know that people experience stress daily, and I see it all the time, and stress is often very tangible. There's not enough food, there's not housing, there's not jobs, there's not money. But there's also another layer of stress that we don't often see. And that comes from daily bias that people experience. It comes from attacks on personal dignity, what are called microaggressions, just little tiny wounds that are inflicted upon people every single day that slowly cut people down. And from these stresses, our town's not immune. So this is not a problem that's unique to people out there. This is not somebody else's problem. What we know and what we've seen and what we've heard is that this is our problem. So, we're a community, and in Haddon Township, our saying is community. This is where community thrives. So kind of coming together in this way this is what community is about. And creating safe spaces is really community in action. So this is what it's about, all of us coming together and making things happen for ourselves as individuals, but also for towns and communities at large. So oftentimes, we look around and what we see first is differences. But by the definition of community, we all are living together with the purpose of standing for something collectively. We all hope for things collectively, and we all want things collectively. There's a commonality between us, and working to direct our attention to that rather than focusing on how we're all different is how we're going to move forward. And recognizing that there is a problem, there is an issue, and we need to validate that issue, and we need to address that issue is how we're going to make progress. So again, Matt, I really appreciate and want to thank you for creating this opportunity for us all to get together. So thank you.
So we're going to try and dispense with the podium, which means we're going to these guys. Who can I trust the most with this over here?
Handing it right here.
So the key thing for this is give yourself about this much room between the mouth and the microphone, and you'll be good.
Testing.
Yeah, sounds good. It's working out. I'm just going to come down here. I really would have been happy to not use the podium because I think part of this is just getting everybody at the same eye level, so thank you for indulging this. One of the things that I wanted to speak about with everybody here is there's a couple of immediate incidents that happen in Haddon Township that we can point to. Correlation is not causation, but we are starting to see data, and data in this area of conversation tends to be large and looming. Reverend Cook described an incident in 2012 that happened right up the street in the historic Sadlertown area of town. A couple weeks ago, there was a sign that was nailed to the ground on a small out-of-the-way street of Haddon Township that told wetbacks to go back where you belong. It's at Mexicans Go Home. And then this week we reported on a bias incident that happened in the high school this year involving a high school senior who was participating in a play in an arts production, which is typically, you talk about a safe space, usually the arts are a place for that. So while this is not, I'm not trying to make this about the stuff that happened, but when the stuff happens and people don't make anything of it, then people who are affected by it may not necessarily feel like the conversation that could be happening is happening. So the point of this event intentionally is to say, like, all right, I feel like there's a way for us to put our prejudices or biases on the table emotionally. Like, I don't want my feelings to get hurt if I ask a question you get upset by, and I don't want you to think I'm asking a question because I want to hurt your feelings. I think if we can get to a place where we can have more safe areas to say, I respect your basic human dignity, and I don't understand why this is a problem, or I don't understand how this feels. That's what my objective is if people can, it feels like so much to just get out there before you can even just say what you mean, but everybody is suspicious because we are bombarded with information and sales pitches and turns of phrase. So if we can all do that, I'd be great. But the first reason that we're talking about data is because when that sign went up and was nailed to the ground, I took a look at the data. The Uniform crime statistics published by the state police department. Now, we know two things about bias incidents. One, there are very specific criteria that make something count as a bias incident. Basically, the law tries to take away any possible other mitigating circumstance except for an example of discrimination in a crime where discrimination generally appears to be a primary mitigating factor. So that's the first part. The second part is that there are three types of people that always seem to become the victims of crime. By racial definition, it is black people in New Jersey. By religious definition, it is Jewish people in New Jersey. By ethnic definition, it is Hispanic people in New Jersey. And you can go look at the data for like the last, I'm gonna say 6 or 7 years when they started keeping it and breaking it down. And there is just a problem for people of these backgrounds encountering people who just feel like when they have disagreements, confusion, malice, whatever the thing is, that's what they go back to focus on. Something that people cannot change culturally, physically. And so what I kind of wanted to open it up to the panel to start is, if we look at that data and we see that data isn't budging, what do we need people who may be in the part of the non-victimized group of individuals to understand about what that data shows us? Does anybody have any thoughts? In the mic, if you would, just, and this is really for the folks at home. Just, I trust that everyone here can hear, but this is also going out to the.
So I'm acknowledging that I'm not really answering the question, but I'm providing some information that will hopefully extract additional commentary and dialogue. When I heard those are accurate statistics, I will tell you that they are probably changing. And this is the Jewish person who acknowledges that, again, we are the fourth highest ranked state in the number of anti-Semitic incidents in the country. However, I didn't get to share with it in my bio, I'll say, but I am the facilitator or convener of what's called the Jewish Catholic Muslim Dialogue in South Jersey, and I suspect that the Muslim community's incidence of bias will be soon becoming higher than the others. That's a problem in and of itself, meaning that anything's increasing, but I think we all understand where that, well, I don't want to make any assumptions of where that comes from, but I believe it comes from just fear of the unknown, the mystery surrounding Islam for so many people. I can ask, if you don't mind, by show of hands, how many people have Muslim friends that they are close with or associate with? And this does not surprise me for the people that are here in this room. I'm so thrilled to see this number of hands go up. I know too many people who truly have never met a Muslim. And, you know, I'm sure with some of the work you do, until something happens in somebody's family, they met a gay, lesbian, or transgender person. Or, you know the different things we're speaking to. So I guess you asked, like, how do we deal with that or respond to that? It's get to know your neighbors. When I say neighbors, it means coworkers. It means fellow church or religious institution members who that are different than you. It's the easiest and most effective. Just learn something about someone else that is different than yourself. And when you know someone and you talk to somebody and you know them as a person, it's very hard to either dislike them or to, and I'm going to throw this out there right now, to just lump everybody together. I've jotted it down here. One of the things I do not accept in any of my encounters with people, whenever somebody uses the expression they, them, or those people, just shut it down. There is no such group of they, them, or it's just incorrect to ever, lump any group of anybody all together. We're all individuals. We all have our, strengths, weaknesses, and, I think it's what makes us, or what's different about us is what makes us unique and fascinating. So, back to you.
I guess to kind of build on that a little bit about love your neighbor, knowing your neighbor. It's amazing how we have so many really brilliant people in this world who can actually look at an individual and actually say, I know what you're about, without having that conversation, right? And I think you hit it right on the head. Until you know me, don't speak about me. And that's how I kind of go through life a little bit. Because once you get to know me, you'll find out that I'm no different from anybody, right? And if you look at interracial marriages, if you look at men and women, I can guarantee you one thing. If you took a group of married men, all different genders, and I'm all different ethnic backgrounds, the whole 9 yards, put them in a room, and you took a group of women, married women, and put them in a room. At the end of the day, no matter what color you are, no matter what you are, that man and that woman act the same exact way. Right? Think about that, right? So why should the color of someone's skin determine how you look at them or how you feel about them, and you have no idea who they are? So, and that's it. I mean, it's real simple. Just have a conversation, talk to the person, find out what's going on, you know? I first moved into my neighborhood over in West Berlin, and at first I kind of took offense to the question that was asked to me from my neighbor, but, you know, he came in and he said to me, hey, you know, 2 days I'm out there messing around in the yard. Second day I'm there. He goes, hey, you don't mind if I ask you a personal question, do you? So I'm thinking to myself, what in the world could this guy want to ask me? And he says to me, did you rent or did you buy? And I said, I'm here to stay. I'm here to stay. 8 years later, I got a key to his house. He has a key to my house. When I go away, he comes over, watches my dog, lets my dog out, feeds my dog, the whole 9 yards, right? But that first image of him seeing me come in, right? Young black guy coming in, got a couple new cars, you know what I mean? Like, really don't know me, you know, are you renting or buying? It's kind of a weird question to ask your neighbor, right? But over the time, I found out, now I could have took that the wrong way, but for the last 15 years, that house has been a rental property, and he's had issues with the renters next to it. So in his mind, he's not being racist or biased. He's just trying to figure out, am I going to have another problem on my hand, or am I going to have a true neighbor now? And my first thought is like, dude, really? Like, I'm just a neighbor. That was so ridiculous already. So, but again, once he got to know who I was, and once we really had some dialogue, best neighbor I could ever have. Best neighbor I could ever have. So, and that just brings you back to the point. Just have a conversation with somebody of a different color before you make a judgment on them. Before you do it, you know, if you look at what's going on now on a national level, I've never imagined if President Obama right now acted the same exact way as Donald Trump is acting, what would be the different response? Right? Right? So the blindness that happens, that's happening on an everyday basis right now, that's going on, that you don't see there's a difference in the way different people are treated, makes you think. It really makes you think of where this world is going to, and what we're doing here. And it's scary. It's really scary. And, you know, in these forums here, I don't really like to get a lot of political. I like to really keep it. But the bottom line of it is that we got to get out and move. We got to get out and make sure that we're picking the right people that's doing it, right? If nothing else happens, the most important thing that's going to come out of this election is who that appointment is to the Supreme Court justice. The most important thing that probably can happen that can literally change the face of this country one way or the other. Because right now there are some issues that are on the table right now that are 4-4 ties to the deadlock. So that last justice who gets appointed really can make a difference in how this world is shaped for a very long time. So that's true. But you know what? You know what's funny of it? Look at it, and really weigh it out. I mean, no matter what happens, everybody's got their quirks and everybody's got their issues and problems with it, right? At this point here is really picking the lesser of two evils. I mean, if you really think about it, right? And I know Brother Brown here. He's a big Bernie guy, and I believe in Bernie too, and I understand all that, and it goes that way. And I can tell you this much here, you know, the way this party got together, you can see the difference in the separation of the other party, and that just goes to show you what happens when you really bring people together. That's how you bring a party together. That's how you bring things together. And I'm telling you, we got to just keep an eye on it. people rely on, and that's not politics right now.
I was going to say race, religion, and politics.
We're gonna get there. I mean, if this conversation doesn't have it, you will not need it. I will guarantee that. Michelle.
So just to add, if we could all just kind of take one thing away from this conversation, which is to kind of reflect upon, what's our responsibility as individuals. Because there's many times that we are, kind of in social situations where people say things that you kind of know are inappropriate, are wrong, have some undertone or undercurrent, but we don't say anything. So when you don't say anything, you're giving people permission and saying that you agree with that. So when you're silent, what you're saying is that I'm on board with your thing. So, what we need to do as individuals is kind of stand up and have, that's the uncomfortable. This is uncomfortable. That's uncomfortable. When it comes to your family and friends, when you hear things that are, kind of contributing to the racial divide, the gender divide, or whatever divide there is contributing to that. So it's important that people kind of take that leap, and it is uncomfortable and it can be scary, but take that brave leap to kind of say, I'm not with what you're saying, and what you're saying is wrong, and I'm not down with that. I'm not into that. I'm not into what you're saying. So, when people just talk, sometimes they just have an audience and nobody says anything. But when they feel uncomfortable, sometimes it kind of puts people in check and gives them the pause that they need to reflect upon, some of the things that they say.
Just don't get suction cups and climb what's happening.
So I think this is a pertinent thing. We have a couple of, just 1 second. We have a couple of envelopes at the front of the room. One says, I would like to share an experience. One says, I would like to ask a question. And one of the first things that I found in there is a remark that says, I live in a town that is very predominantly white. I'm afraid that whatever I say or think about my openness to all races and ethnicities is contradicted by my choice of where to live. Not sure the fullness of this, if this is an experience or if I believe this is somebody who feels like they live in a place where they're not sure that the rest of the neighborhood is calling attention to things, that maybe that is that silent assent that you're speaking about. Is there a way to have a conversation where you feel like you want people to take notice that there's other folks that they might not encounter on a daily basis, but that they still live among, or who still may live among them? I think one of the things that I would say about the sign that was found, and when it was put down, there was a lot of conversation about why someone would do that or who did it. And the only question to me that needs to be answered is, how does it make everybody else feel? Because it almost doesn't matter what the reason is that somebody did it, and it doesn't matter if it doesn't affect you, but if there is somebody that does see that and feel like they're nervous in their own neighborhood now, that's the person that we have to try to find out and let them know where they live. So does anybody have any ideas for when you feel like you live in a place that doesn't allow you to express what you really feel about inclusion, or how you feel like you might be judged for living in a particular community that doesn't appear inclusive? Are there ways to break down any of those barriers? Yes, hello. Let me take the mic out to the field for you. Okay.
I don't need that.
Okay.
On a global sense, Haddon Township, as far into the future as any of us can imagine, will dig in its heels and fight against affordable housing until we all drop dead of exhaustion and boredom. That sets the tone for all of Westmont. I question their statistics.
Which statistics? I'm sorry.
The statistics of the racial breakdown. If you came from the Cooper River up to the library, hello, que pasa? My grandchildren went to the Edison School since 2008. One in 1 year, one the next year. So I have a long sentence of going to the Edison School every day. Neither of those girls
So if I could, what I think the question,
By definition, we're living in a totally segregated town. Whatever you want to call it, whatever little sliver over here in this direction that borders on Camden,
well, there's 7 towns that touch Haddon Township, and all of these towns were at one point one colony of people from Ireland and England and stuff like that, and there were other people here when they got here. But I take your point that the zip code divides probably in this particular area among these communities skews predominantly white, and I think that's why I would like to say, so if your community is predominantly white and your experiences are predominantly white, it may be harder for you to conceive of things that don't affect predominantly white experience. And so what I would like to challenge everybody to do, or maybe hear ideas about doing, is how do we acknowledge that that is our experience, but that our experience is not everyone's experience? How do we as a community, and I don't speak of zip code definition municipalities, I speak of people who live in this South Jersey region, how do we reach out to areas where we don't have experience and acknowledge that there is another experience? You had a hand up. Yeah, here.
Hello, my name is Ainori Guy from Lindenwold, which I actually believe is one of the most diverse towns in South Jersey. I'm very proud of that. Not proud of the fact that whenever I tell somebody I'm from Lindenwold, they look at me like I'm poor and, oh, you live in Lindenwold. Why didn't you move to Cherry Hill? You know, so that's what I get. But I do want to say to the question, and I have to leave early, so I just wanted to get this in before I left. To the question, I would say that the tension might draw the actual person to not focus on the community members who are not talking to her, or he or she may be afraid to talk to, but to challenge themselves to go up to the one minority in the school and say, listen, I'm having these feelings, because most of the minorities have been having these feelings since we were about this little. And so we welcome the opportunity to have a conversation, which may open the door for now 2 people, one white, one black, to talk to somebody who might be Japan, who's having the same problem. And eventually you kind of get a group together and you're talking, and you can bring it to the, parent board. You're talking about the schools, the PTA or whatever you call it down here, PAC or whatever. So I would say that to the question. What I wanted to say before I left is that we have to start challenging our teachers in the schools with their attitudes, because I have 2 African American boys, very bright, very sociable, but before they open their mouths, they get treated a certain way. And I've been dealing with that since they were very little. And the teachers don't necessarily understand that they're coming to the children with what you call the microaggression. So, for example, when they tried to teach about Martin Luther King when my son was in 1st grade, he came home very upset because the picture that she put up was of Rosa Parks in jail. And he's like, his whole interpretation at 6 was, she's teaching me about the civil rights movement, and Rosa Parks went to jail for doing something right. Then when she showed the movie, 6 years old, she showed the shot where Martin Luther King got shot on the balcony. In her head, she's doing something to help diversify. But my son is learning a lesson. If I stand up, I'm going to jail or I'm gonna get shot. So I have to talk to the teacher now. And I'm the only one, according to them, that has come to them about this issue. Another teacher in 8th grade decided to show Roots. Didn't even tell me. Son came home devastated because the scene she showed was when Kunta Kinte got chained up and could no longer free himself, and they put him on a boat. And the consciousness is not there. The teachers don't have the consciousness of the black family or the black student. And so we end up as parents in a situation where we have to start a conversation that sometimes they don't want to have. But as a black mother, I have to have this conversation. We have to look at the news and see these things about our sons being shot, killed. We want to talk. So don't worry about the ones who aren't talking to you. Don't worry about your friends who you know are prejudiced. Come talk to us. We want to talk. You might just feel better for having the conversation and knowing that, you know, you allowed yourself as a white person to open your heart up to a black mother. And that means the world. So I wanted to say that before I left. I know it's heavy, but I also do work with helping. Because of all of this, I help families who are suffering with this issue. And I have to tell you, in South Jersey, at least 3 times a year, I am communicating with schools or with parents on behalf of a racial incident, terrible racial incident. To, you know, get in touch with harassment and bullying. So I did want to say that. And, you know, I hopefully, you know, I want to get in contact with a few of you, you know, after we leave, so.
I know you have to excuse yourself.
Yeah.
Please take my business card. We deal with this issue as well within the districts on a
Thank
pretty regular
you.
basis. And so I'm
Right.
sorry we did not meet earlier, but that's why this type of gatherings are beneficial. So
No problem. So I did want to, I hate to, I have
we
to
know of what
go.
you speak.
Love you all. I want to grab a card, if you don't mind. I'll grab a card before I leave.
Michelle, can you speak a little bit to how that stuff happens in the schools where, again, this is what was described as a lot of this happening throughout the school experience. When you speak about the impact of grief or trauma or the impact of a small stress like this over a period of time, can you talk about, number one, what that does to relationships and people, and number two, how any of those things get addressed?
So in my experience, I work in North Philadelphia, and the majority of students that we service are minority students, but our teaching staff doesn't reflect the students that we serve. So it's an issue. It's an issue. I would say, by and large, it's an issue that's not reflected upon or considered or really kind of factored into the equation of what good quality instruction looks like. So it really is. It's a major consideration and a major kind of barrier to learning for a lot of students. And one of the issues, you know, and I think it's something difficult. It's something that people need to reflect upon, and it's hard to reflect upon, is what is it? Black people have been thinking about what it means to be black for a really long time. You know what I mean? But white people need to think about what it means to be white and what that means in terms of how you interact with people on a day-to-day basis, and what your whiteness means in terms of your responsibility. So, as a white woman who deals with, you know, the majority of my clientele is African American boys, you know, I have to have some consideration about, you know, what's my motivation, what am I hoping to accomplish, am I, you know, and this is not just me, but educators in general, am I, you know, sharing this information because I want to feel better? You know, am I showing roots because I want to feel like I'm a culturally competent person, sharing information and doing the right thing? Or am I really considering what the experience feels like for the other person? So what that comes down to is empathy. And, you know, I think, you know, we've all heard that kind of socially there's a void in our society when it comes to empathy. And when there's a breakdown in empathy, that of course is going to affect relationships, because relationships are built on that mutual consideration of your personhood, right? So if you know, you're not putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, you're really jeopardizing your ability to establish some of these really strong relationships that can support, you know, growth and development for kids. Intentions may be good, the goal might be good, but, you know, people really need to consider, you know, where are they coming from, and what does their own personal experience have to do with the information that they're sharing with kids in particular. Because while their intentions, again, might be good, they're not putting themselves in the shoes of the students who may receive the information differently than what it was supposed to be.
Yeah, could I say something?
You can say anything you want.
Well, everybody knows, because I told you, that I'm clergy. I've heard terms such as stereotyping, prejudice, and white privilege. I think that all our feelings, actions, behavior come from the heart. It's what drives us, how we feel. Education is a key, but it's not going to stick if you don't internalize it and apply it to heart and exercise what is right in your heart. Well, again, the heart is deceitful. The heart is wicked. And being a clergy, I'm going to preach a little bit, because of who we are, how we are born, all these negativity feelings that arise within us, and we act on it because it's who we are. We can't help it. We're human, and we have feelings of anger, jealousy, hate, even murder. We have those feelings, and sometimes we act on them. But that's why there are laws to govern our behavior. But I'm going to go beyond the law, which should punish our behavior that is criminal or unjust. I want to go beyond that because I am a pastor, and bring in why Jesus died for our sins, so that we don't have to react to those feelings that are within us, that we must be born again of his Spirit. And once we receive that Spirit, it is within us, and it helps to fight the natural feelings that arise within us. And so in this, this forum needs to get to the root of the problem. I mean, I hear situations and I hear education, but the root of the problem is your heart. You've got to, and everybody, they have to examine. The church stands as a beacon of light, as a savior, and it doesn't have the impact that it should have for some reason. People don't have faith in it anymore. But that's what I really wanted to say. It begins with the heart. You have to want to be nice to one another. You have to want to respect one, regardless of who they are. What is our Constitution? That all men are created equal and have the right to pursue happiness and whatever else it says. That's our Constitution. But it begins with the heart. That's really what I wanted to say.
I'm not ready to convert yet, but I listened to you any Sunday.
Jim, can I ask if you'd be able to follow up, just because I think a lot of the rights that have the strides that civil rights have made in the last immediate recent past have been on issues of same-sex marriage, issues of gender equality, issues of different experiences. Can you speak about how finding what's in your heart to confront things that are typically known as not the regular issue or confusing, not familiar experiences, how does that affect folks that you guys work with? And what are some of the ways that you can make inroads in those kinds of conversations?
So one thing I just want to, before that even, I wanted to go back to the first topic that you mentioned was data. And one thing I just wanted to point out is that when it comes to data and it comes to the LGBTQ community, often we're not included in the data. And so in my research, one of the things I found is that there are often crimes against people who are transgender that are never reported as crimes against someone who is transgender. Often, if the person is murdered and the family doesn't acknowledge that person as being transgender, it never comes out anywhere that that person was transgender. Also, often people who are transgender specifically, but also lesbian, gay, or bisexual, don't necessarily advertise or share that part of themselves. So in crime statistics and things like that, it's not necessarily always accurate. I was trying to find out what part of our population might be transgender, and it's really difficult to find that out because there's no way to know that for sure. Estimates are about 700,000 people in the United States, but who knows? So to get to what your question was, though. I think that I definitely appreciate your sentiments, absolutely. And as a person who's a member of a faith community in a large church that is not accepting, I am a practicing Catholic. I attend a Roman Catholic church in the Diocese of Camden. But I think what we find is that many of our members come to us because they have been excluded from their faith. They feel that maybe their church has turned their back on them. Some have explicitly been told they're not welcome. And so that's something that often comes up in our meetings, is that we have people who are grappling with, how do I continue my faith and it's generally as a Christian. When I go to my church and I'm hearing about how my child is a sinner and they're going to hell for their sins, whether it's lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender, those are messages that people receive. One of the things I personally, as someone who is a member of a faith community and feels as though I am affirmed within my community, if not within the larger church, I try to encourage people to find those congregations that are accepting and affirming. They exist. I don't know that they exist for every single denomination, but my experience has been most denominations do have some local congregation that is accepting, affirming. But it's a difficult thing when you're being told that because of who you are and how you identify, you are no longer loved by your God. And think about that. If Jesus Christ is my Savior, and someone is telling me that I'm an abomination, which means that I'm hated by God, God doesn't hate.
No.
God does not hate.
God is love.
Exactly, God is love. And that's a difficult thing for a lot of people to work through. And a lot of times I will find, prior to my work with PFLAG, I was very active in a congregation in Philadelphia. It's an organization called Dignity. I don't know if anyone here is familiar with Dignity. There's Dignity USA, similar to PFLAG has national. Well, Dignity USA exists, and there's a Dignity Philadelphia. What Dignity is, it's a group of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender allies as well, who are Catholic and continue to practice their faith, but they are no longer necessarily a part of the hierarchy of the church. And when I was with that organization very actively, I'm one of the past presidents of the organization of Dignity Philadelphia. And when we would be at street fairs or different events, or even I would just bump into people and talk about the organization that I was a part of, so many people within the LGBTQ community would just keep on walking by, look the other way. I don't want anything to do with the church. I don't want anything to do with Catholicism. I don't want anything to do with any church, were often messages I would hear. I would often hear, the church has hurt me enough. The church has hurt my family enough. And to me, as a Catholic, as a Christian, as a person of faith, that's a really sad thing.
I think people have a lot of those experiences with big institutions. My school didn't do what my school was supposed to do. The police didn't come when I called them. My elected officials don't represent my views. About the only thing people can pretty much agree on is the fire company is solid and they're volunteers. So I think that part of the issue, again, Freeholder, goes back to what you said about you don't know, and David too, you as well, the they, the them, the collective, whomever. If we lose track of individuals as a complicated set of perspectives, as a complicated set of problems, people who have their own information streams that are running on repeat, like the CNN crawl in the back of their mind when they're driving, looking at their watch, or phone really, some other situation. Everybody has that constantly going on in the back of their head, and it may be that we do the they, them, it, because our brain just doesn't have enough processing power to handle that many kinds of distinctions. But around this room, there is more than just a face or a wardrobe or a posture or anything like that. It all goes back to people being individuals and groups of individuals. Did you?
I just wanted to kind of speak on her issue about the school. And, we often hear this word systematic racism, right? You hear this hidden racism, things like that. And let's really think about what she just talked about. Let's think about the image that is placed into a young mind, right? and I believe, and I could be wrong on the numbers, but I think somewhere between the ages of 6 and 12 is the most developmental time of that child's memory and what happens in that child. So, first of all, I think it's crap that we have 1 month out of the year, all right? And the big joke is it's the shortest month out of the year. It's Black History Month, right? So now you go through this. So now you go through this process where and it's just like you said. Oh, I want to show roots, and I want to do this, and I want to do that. And which, if you look at it, that's really it's the beginning of it. It's the understanding of it. I get all that, but why not talk about the guy who invented the curtain rod, who was a black man? Why not talk about the guy who invented the washer, so we all can wash our clothes and not on the rock, was a black man? Why don't we talk about the reason why we can stop at every single corner with a stoplight, because it was invented by a black man, right? You don't hear those stories, you don't hear those things. It's always the negative side of it that you hear. And that becomes a huge issue, and partially because of, and I'm going to throw it out there, and I might get a little flack from it, it's partially because of parenting that we do, all right? And I'll tell you this reason why here. I was talking to, when I first got appointed to Freeholder, I was down at Woodrow Wilson High School, and the superintendent down there is doing a fantastic job down there with the kids. Kids are now wanting to go to school. They're not lingering around the hallways. They're doing it. They're feeling safer. They're doing the whole 9 yards. They're learning better. The graduation rate is getting up there. So I'd say, hey, that's really great. How many parents come to back to school night? How many parents actually get involved into the system of making sure that your curriculum, that you're teaching, is the proper curriculum? That's where we come in as parents. That's where we have to get back into the schools and start to understand what's going on. All that blaming the teacher and this, that, and the other while I'm sitting at home on my couch, just kind of hanging out, right? So there's that common bond that has to come back. It has to come back. Wasn't nothing wrong with the old days, right? I'm sure everybody in here, I don't know, we'll go from 69 up, right? 69 down, rather. And understands that, hey, listen, discipline was discipline, right? I never would have thought of, if I did something wrong, I owned it. My parents disciplined me, whether it was with a belt, with a switch, or whatever it was. Never could ever imagine telling my dad, you hit me again, I'm calling diapers. Right? Could never imagine that. Look how we turned out, right? There's no harm. And I'm not at all saying that beat your child. That's not where I'm going with it. But I'm just saying that some of the things that were done as we were a child to make sure that we have a better life today are gone, or out of the window. And I think half of the problem is from us wanting our children to have more than what we had. Spoiling them a little, hey, I don't want you to go through that. But you know what? The trials and tribulations that I went through got me to where I am today and made me a stronger man and a better man at what I am today. So why shouldn't my kid go through that a little bit? Right? Builds a little bit of character. So, this cuddling that we do and the whole 9 yards that we do, it's great. It's great. Nurture them, do the whole 9 yards. But we as parents have to be more involved in what our kids do every day. We can't be afraid to check cell phones. We can't be afraid to do all the things that, hey, I'm invading his privacy. You're in my house paying no rent. Right? So your privacy right now, it is what it is, but the bottom line of it is that, okay, I won't look at your phone, but I won't pay the bill either. So you won't have a phone. So that's what we have to kind of get back to some of that tough love parenting, and I think it works a lot better, and some of that encouraging parenting as well, right? Tough love parenting, nothing wrong with it. I grew up with it, and I think I'm pretty good right now. So, yeah, and I kind of put my kids through it.
So there's a couple of hands over there. No, not at all. I can come around. Did you? Here. Yeah.
So if we go under the silence is compliance, right? And then we sort of go along with the institutionalized. We want our kids to also sort of respect the authority of schools, their teachers, whatnot. If we look at an incident such as what was reported this past week of the arts and the safe place, the racial incidents that occurred. I don't live in Haddon Township, but I would venture to say that, you know, parents are very involved and very active in their students' lives, in their kids' lives, in an active role. When a school district appears to be handling the situation completely wrong, how are you supposed to discuss that with your kid, you know?
Educator first.
So I'm a resident in Haddon Township, so this is a conversation that I've had with my own kids, because I've shared the article with them, shared the incident, and, you know, we've had a lot of discussions, and, you know, it wasn't our first discussion about race and bias and racism, so it was an extension of conversation that we have, and I think going back to, you know, what's a parent's responsibility is to open this conversation, and people need to not be afraid to talk about race with their kids. Talking about race doesn't make people racist. Talking about race doesn't put ideas in people's heads about people. When you talk openly and freely and talk about ways that, you know, racism is perpetuated in the media, it's perpetuated in society in different ways, but just exposing your kids to how there are things going on that we have no control over, but we do have control over our reactions to them and how we digest that information. So, you know, in terms of how do you talk to your kids, you know, if you've already, you know, kind of set, like, what's your family mission? You know, like, what does your family stand for? I think that's important is to communicate to your kids that this is what we stand for as a family, and we don't stand for this. And this happened in our school district. How do you feel about this? What do you think what do you think you would do? And what do you think what do you think my response as a parent? And it's important for them to kind of generate ideas about what kind of generate problem solving around this, because this is real life for them too, because they encounter this every single day. But it's imperative that you talk about it. And people don't make a fuss about things for a lot of reasons. I think, you know, in small towns when nothing goes wrong, people want it to not go wrong. You know, people are very invested in, this is a great place, and it is in a lot of ways. But it's okay for us to recognize a problem and address it. And by talking to your kids about, you know, what's going on in the community and in the country at large, you're doing that.
I do. So obviously plenty of institutional bias that we can all recognize and know that has to be, you know, addressed. We're probably not going to solve that, you know, in this session tonight. But
You promised me, David, when I brought you on.
Yeah. Well, no. The reason I say that is whenever I, you know, go out to audiences and give talks, I always say I really want to commend everybody for giving up your time and coming here tonight just to even be part of this conversation. However, if that's all it is and you go home and said you heard some interesting speakers, learned little things, to me that's not enough. So, I mean, I can't force you to do anything, but I wanted to share with you, and Michelle, you said it earlier about responsibility. And my new friend, Reverend Alice, I'll only disagree with one thing with the, you know, the wicked heart or something I heard there. What I find fascinating and, you know, is, you know, you look at preschool and elementary school kids, it is, you know, talk about melting pot. I mean, they just play with whomever's there. Middle school gets a little bit, you know, I don't want to say the word clique yet, but, you know, you start seeing them segregate out to, you know, people that are like themselves. And by high school, you have true cliques. That just tells me the heart, you know, you were born with, you know, colorblind, faith blind. It's coming from somewhere, and it often is the home. I think we know that. We can blame the media, we can blame teacher. The home, meaning ourselves, is where to start. So, I just took part in a faith, it was faith-based, but it was open to all, like, leaders, elected officials in Trenton just a couple weeks ago. And NJ Penn should get a lot of credit for putting this together. Perhaps, we didn't talk about this beforehand, you can put it on your website, but I want to share with you a pledge that we all took. And I've been using this lately. It's only been a couple of weeks, but multiple times. I just found it so instructive of how I think about my own responsibility. So I want to share it with all of you if I may. It's called the Pledge to Stand Up for the Other, and it ties into everything I've really been hearing tonight. The background to it is that racial bigotry, religious persecution, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, you know, the issues of gay and lesbian, you know, speaking out negatively or with any type of preconceived notion, or any form of hatred cannot be wiped out unless each and every one of us confronts it within our own circles of family, friends, and others we interact with. Silence is seen as consent. It takes courage to stand up for the other. By taking this pledge, each one of us can make a profound difference in the world. And the pledge that we all took, clergy, again, elected officials, leaders in the communities, while interacting with members of my own faith or ethnic community, or with others, if I hear hateful comments from anyone about members of any other community, I pledge to stand up for the other and challenge bigotry in any form. It's simple, it's straightforward, and we are guilty of it. I've told jokes that are inappropriate. I have not responded to somebody when they've said something inappropriate. I will give you, because again, I know I'll cut myself off in a minute. The best tool, because it's uncomfortable, it's awkward responding to, again, a friend or somebody you associate with. People just don't know how to handle this. I will give you the one tip that is like the golden rule of how to at least demonstrate to an individual that what they just expressed or shared or said was a little inappropriate. You simply need to respond, what did you mean by that? That's it. What did you mean by that? They'll get this look like what I do. It just makes them, it'll make them more sensitive to what they just said. It doesn't mean you have to confront them, but I just shared that with all of you, and now I will stop.
Sure, please.
Yeah, I'm a teacher. I was a teacher. I'm a retired teacher and a parent. And in my view, it can't just start, you can't start having these discussions with children once they're in school. I think your responsibility as a parent virtually has to start at birth, where you're encouraging curiosity to learn and the joy of learning and empathy for not only people around you, but the environment and nature. And right away, interact with your children, not set up some place for them to go so they can have fun somewhere else, but to interact with your own children and show them how happy you are at their joy of what they're seeing and who they're speaking with and how those people, and talk about their lives, talk about those plants, the insects, birds, whatever it is, but have that conversation from the very beginning. You can't just start it, okay, I see a problem in my school, now I'm going to talk to my child about it. It's got to start immediately from birth.
I saw a couple of hands, please.
Hi, my husband and I are here house hunting, actually. We're from Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis is not necessarily known as a place that appreciates different cultures and races and ethnicities, unfortunately. But one thing I did want to ask, particularly from the expert on personal safety, and you have interracial children, this is my husband. We have an 11-year-old son who is very athletic. He's tall for his age. You can mistake him for 13 probably. He got a BB gun for Christmas, and it's still in the box because I'm just too afraid to have him be the young black male with a weapon. So how do you balance teaching your children respect for authority, personal safety, but maintaining their innocence?
Thank you very much. Anybody want to?
The biggest battle for me in raising my kids as interracial kids were pretty much, as you walk that right path, right, you set that foundation, and you know that foundation is strong with it. I'm not a big proponent of guns. Never have been. BB, play water guns, and it is what it is. But we just never went down that road. So for me, it was just something that, was still for me with my father. I never seen him with guns, so I've really never had a big thing about guns, so it really didn't bother that. But that is a problem with it, right? So, you got to kind of be able to know what the limitations are on it. In today's world, it's a shame that you can't, even sit around and play Cowboys and Indians, right? Because of fearful of doing something, or having that thought process of you having a gun and getting shot with it. Play with it during the day, and be disciplined with him and say, listen, when the night comes down, when they can't tell if it's fake or real, it's not going out. It's not doing anything. Good example of that is, and I guess this is probably one of the big reasons why I never did the gun thing. We were down the shore, and we did have, they had it was a bright orange BB gun that shot the plastic pellets. Well, my kid did take it to school, and it was a big deal that was made out of it. And this was right around that time where you can do it. And getting back to being an involved parent in the schools, if that principal, and I believe this to this day, if that principal did not know me by name because I'm there, I'm involved in it, I don't think I would have got the first phone call. I think the first phone call would have been to the police, and then there it is. Right now, all of a sudden you have this, 9-year-old kid that's got an issue with the police now. And so when I say getting involved with it, and that's a lot of that stuff that we can cut right out of it. Sure.
So just because I happened to be at another sort of uncomfortable conversation a week ago in Camden, Cory Booker came down, the U.S. Senator from New Jersey, and he was sitting on a panel with Scott Thompson, who's the chief of Camden Police, the New Jersey U.S. Attorney General Paul Fishman, and the Reverend from the oldest black church in Camden City. And this discussion came up, and Chief Thompson said that in the 21st century policing initiatives that the Obama administration requisitioned, one of the things that they're finding, because the police are still looking for data too, he said they have to rely on the Guardian Project when they find out about a life taken in a police-involved shooting. He said that what some of the things are that they're discovering is that sometimes police who are involved in those situations of bias that you might see or accusations, they've already been involved in some other situation where they didn't receive counseling, they didn't receive grief training, they have had post-traumatic stress that has contributed to their reaction to things. So if that's just the police in a super high-stress job and they can't get the counseling to back away from moments like that, and we're just regular people who have the regular people stresses that we sort of accept as normal to try to make rent or care about getting your kids to practice or to school or to follow whatever the social stream is of your immediate friends online. When that stuff happens, we might all be dealing with some stuff, and we don't really have a place to say, I might be dealing with some stuff. So I think most people, if you acknowledge that to them, will be willing to give you a break or to just say, okay, well, let's come back to it. And that's not to take away from what's going on in your situation, but part of that is that they don't have data either. They have been involved in areas where they may not get counseling and they need it. And I just think that it's telling to come back around to what you say is, how do you keep your children safe? And the other thing that the U.S. Attorney General Fishman said was, introduce them to the people who are the leaders in their community. If the radio is faster than the beat cop, at least let somebody in the station know who your kid is and who your family is, so that there is a personal relationship there with your principal, with your elected officials, with your law enforcement, with your teacher, with your neighbor, with the person who you always disagree with on Facebook, with whomever. Make sure there is a personal relationship that at least acknowledges, I am a member of this community and I am a collection of different viewpoints and experiences. And I'm not one thing to be dismissed because you're having a rough day, person in charge. And I think that's part of it. Please, I'll hand this over to you.
How's everybody doing? This is a nice, event. Just to talk about, you mentioned how to keep your children safe. And to dovetail on what you said, I always hear older adults say, when I was growing up, mom and dad, really disciplined me. And from my perspective, that was because they were afraid you was going to run in with the cops. So they, they had to make sure that you understood authority, and that's the way it is today. And so there has to be a fear, you know, fear of mom and dad, a fear of authority, you know, because they're going to interact with law enforcement. And also, I was wondering, so I'm glad to be here because what is it, about a month ago I read where the Haddon Township cop got caught, convicting people who were innocent. Did y'all read about that? Was it Haddon Township? And I was wondering, it was pretty big. It's in the Carrier Post, and I was wondering, when I read that article, how can somebody from Haddon Township feel the freedom to go into Camden and to accuse a whole bunch of innocent people for crimes that they did not commit and then come back to Haddon Township? I said to myself, where did he grow up? What elementary school did he go to? What was his high school? Haddon Township? You know, I'm thinking in this day and age, how can he do something like that? It was like 30 or 40 cases where he just lied and put people in jail. And, it really disturbed me that could happen. And I was just wondering if anybody had an opinion on how could that happen in Haddon Township.
I'm not familiar with that story, but I will say that every story happens somewhere, and everybody comes from someplace. And I think that part of the things we in the media have to do a really good job about is making it clear that the stories are from people who are actual people, communities that are actual communities, places that aren't just a fill-in-the-blank line when you're talking about a larger issue that you want to make a point with. So I don't know the specifics. If anybody else does, I would be happy to pass the mic over. That's what I thought too. Okay, so there was, but I believe that the gentleman is a Haddon Township resident who's a Camden Metro police officer. Yeah, I do remember that. That was sort of like if I recall correctly, it was like a shakedown system. So regardless of the origin of the individual or the origin of those behaviors, when I think what you seem to be describing, if I understand correctly, is just a mistrust of people in positions of authority, not using the authority appropriately, and what do we do about that? Is that accurate?
Well, also, we talked about, I'm wondering if he had that mindset because of how he was raised. Maybe his parents didn't mention racial incidents. Like we're talking about now, and how to solve the problem is to talk about things that come up. If you don't talk about it in your home, your children will assume that it's okay. If you just keep silent on it, if you don't, discuss it with your children in little detail, they'll think, mom and dad says that's okay, silence means that you approve of certain situations. And I'm just wondering if he, just speculating, maybe sometimes we grow up in homes that's never discussed, so therefore it's right,
I saw there was a couple of, you were waiting for a little bit back here.
So I have a quick question for you, really for our freeholder, because he hits on a point that really, really frustrates me. In my mind, I was very upset. I read Matt's article and it was great. I was very upset by what happened in play. I was furious that the principal pushed it under the carpet, asked them not to do anything about it. Right? This is a fundamental ethical failure in my mind that he should be fired. Like, how do I, as a citizen, reach past my elected officials and get the people who, basic professional ethics failure there. He should have no job. What do we do about that?
Well, and it brings me kind of back to my opening statement of when I was sitting here and we started talking politics and the whole 9 yards. And it's real simple. It's real simple, right? Your board, it's an elected board, right? And I say it as a politician, as I sit here today, they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. Get them out, because that's the only way it's going to change, right? It's the only way it's going to change. But getting more people involved. Now that happened, the incident happened, and I don't know how many people actually went to the school board meeting the next time after. Were there 3 people in the audience, or was the room packed? What was the response to it? And that's what starts to really, really mean a lot. Because I know, as an elected official, if I had a room full of people, and they're sitting there and they're going crazy and they're basically telling me, you're gone, you're out, kind of makes you put a little light under your butt a little bit, kind of get you moving a little bit, right? So that's the simple answer to it. The other answer is you have to hold them accountable. You know, you are an elected person that this township has decided to put our faith in you to sit there and make sure that our curriculum is correct, make sure that our children are safe, make sure everything that happens within this school district is the right thing to do for our children. If nobody complains about it, right, and we've talked about it, we said it time and time again, silence means it's okay. They're okay with it. I come to a school board meeting, I just had a big incident, I got nobody here in the meeting. It's okay.
My school board did a pretty good job of keeping it out of use. I only heard about it, but I've not heard about it.
Right, and again, it only takes one, right? It takes one person to pick up the phone and call the newspaper and say, hey, this is what happened. Or call somebody else and say, hey, Facebook's an amazing thing. We use Facebook for a ton of things that happen, but it's a true informational stream. Now, I don't know how much of it's actually true sometime on it, but right, and you know, but that's my response to that is that as a community, you must raise up, right? And as the old saying, it takes a village to raise them, right? So where one person might not feel comfortable in speaking out or saying something, right? But hey, I know if I turn around, I got a community backing me. Let's get it done. Yep. I hope I answered.
I'd like to piggyback off what Dave was asking and maybe hear from Mr. Snyder or anyone else who's worked with school systems on issues like this, on what they feel parents could be doing to push the issue, in addition to showing up and raising a little hell at their board meeting.
Since my name was invoked, without knowing the full details of the situation, I wouldn't be hesitant in how I respond. But again, I'll say intentionally, my cards are in the back. We are happy to engage, and we have engaged with, we start with do no further harm when incidents are brought to us. The majority are when it's a classroom-based situation. This clearly is something that's escalated to where it's quite significant. And so you do have to, obviously, it's the principal and then the superintendent. I think what you're referring to, superintendents are often at the mercy of the school board. Principals, it's different. So without knowing the details, I'm sorry I can't give a better response. But it's one thing to say parents get engaged. It's important, it's vital, but I want to say it, the union aspect of a lot of this complicates things. But, noise and consistency, so let me just say with consistency, forget the noise. Not just giving the impression that you're going to accept whatever is decided, and if it's that egregious, and it gets more attention, things can, happen. I just again, I'm sorry, I'm taking a little longer here than I would like, but I want to at least feel like I'm being responsive.
Floor is yours.
Whenever somebody brings an issue to us, the first question I ask is, what do you want done? And you have a lot of sense then as to what they're really looking for. When it starts off with somebody being fired, and again, that's what I've heard tonight already, I'm guessing it's a pretty serious incident. But I'll also share with you, I have things that are brought to our attention that can be resolved and not affect somebody's livelihood, their profession, their reputation, and the like. So without knowing that, again, hard, but happy to see if we can be of any assistance in utilizing the relationships we do have within districts and or, sharing what's occurred in other places and how they've responded. That often will guide school leaders. So
I do want to jump on that real quick because I think, and I'm just coming back because I don't think there's any more questions over there right now. The reaction of how do we take someone's job away for making a mistake, it's a popular one. And I think it is a product of people feeling like they don't have intermediate steps that get attention. It doesn't have to start with you lose your right to work and then your life has a whole bunch of other problems. It could start with here's why what you did doesn't make sense. And in the context of helping people out, why don't we get people education? Why don't we get people counseling? Why don't we get people, again, I believe the reason we're here in a place like this, under a setup like this, is because most of the people who are holding positions of authority have no leash to make a mistake, like an honest, intentioned mistake, a mistake, an error in judgment, a failing of a moment, without it being without people being held to a standard that they would be really finding unfair. If they made, a mistake of that nature at their workplace, and recognize there are different levels of responsibility the higher up the chain you go, but we have to find a way as a group of people to come away from, I want your job, to, I want you to understand why this can't happen again. Because I don't know that there's anybody here under any circumstances who learns from shame. I don't think anybody learns from being told you're a failure, you messed up, or you should feel bad as a person. That doesn't make anybody do anything except find the wherewithal to defend themselves with unrelated information. But he's a good guy, but she really helped my family out. And guess what? Both of those things are true. Like, the good guys can make mistakes, and the people who are criminal, masterminds can still have a moment of dignity or humanity. Nobody is any one of a thing or another, but we have to stop with the zero tolerance policy culture of accountability from people in positions of authority and from people at the bottom rung doesn't produce any sort of understanding. We need human judgment and individual discretion to acknowledge our basic existence instead of finding boxes that we can fit into, because it's easier to group move them. That's my 2 cents. But yeah, come on.
That's the essence of my problem.
Okay.
Highly educated, highly paid, highly compensated, been doing this for a long time. This is the kind of thing that should be reflexively, we need to take care of this right now. We need to resolve this, take care of this, not talk to the parents and ask them to waive their rights under the law and because I feel like the culture of, well, we need to take the measure of the problem gives so much leeway that people are just able to just be like, oh, that wasn't a big deal. And then the systematic racism comes about, right? Because then these people have been disenfranchised. Or something that should be an instant reaction. The principal should have stepped in immediately. The student should have been suspended. There should have been consequences for this basic fundamental violation. This wasn't, in my mind, this wasn't a error of judgment where they slipped across the line. This was well over the line. And that's why
there were consequences in the case you're talking about, but I think what you're describing is the fact that you've identified a need for culture change, yes. And that doesn't come without there being the pain of observing that something's wrong. And so I think the first time that you recognize there's a problem is the place where you now have something that you can specifically talk about as needing to be resolved. Because most of the institutions we live with and we work in have structured sets of policies for everything. And there are policies that are documented about way you're supposed to follow things, the reason for them to be legally airtight, et cetera. And sometimes the policy is used to defend things that are indefensible, or it's ignored altogether. And we suffer from both of those things. But again, I hear where you're coming from, and I'm still going to maintain it comes down to what has been said about individual conversations and what has been said about group statements about availability. And there's someone I think who I just saw a hand go up who could probably lend some light on this.
Hello, everyone. I am Hannah Fields, and I was the victim in the situation that we're all talking about. So the first thing that I thought of when this happened, when I saw that note on stage, was, thank God, because here's the thing. I've been dealing with this since I came out of the womb. I've had this color since I was born. So all of these years of people telling me, oh, that person that yelled out the car window, they probably didn't mean it, or you probably heard it wrong. You're too paranoid. So when this happened, I was like, gotcha. And this exists, and it led to this happening. Now, I'm not to say that I'm glad that it happened, but I'm glad that it happened, because we can now change our way of thinking. We can change the community and eventually change the world's way of thinking. That's the goal, and keep it there. So there were things said to me to try and hush me up, to say, when I was called into the office, there were people telling me, this person is so lucky that this happened to you because you're such a nice person, and you're not going to do much. Well, little did they know. But and that says something. That says a lot, to say, he's safe. Okay, good. So we do know that it's a big issue. We know that it's a big deal. So why would you feel that oh, you know, you're such a nice person if it wasn't such a huge problem and if it wasn't a big deal? So I think that, oh yes.
What's the subtext of you're such a nice person about?
Oh, you're not gonna do anything. Like, you're not gonna act on it. You're not gonna go to the media. You're not going to ask for anything more than your worth. So that's what that is. And I'm not exaggerating. So there were many other things said to me, one of which I wrote, I write, it's something that I do. This person said to me, you know, don't make this your life's work.
This big black thing doesn't really matter to you.
No, you know, don't make this your life's work, Hannah. And to that I said, my life's work. Don't make my life's work. So to say, oh, I can just go out and, you know, bleach myself, which struggling as a small child in the school systems, with which I was a victim of crimes on more than one occasion, I did try to change my life. I did try to bleach myself. I was in 3rd grade, you know? And when you're in a school that I was literally the only person of color in my school, in Haddon Township, Westmont. So seeing all these people around me wanting to, you know, make friends, and, you know, when you're Hannah with the poofy hair, or when you're on a basketball team and a coach from the other team says, oh, you go on the black one, you know, make this my life's work. It's been my life's work. So first of all, I would just like to thank all of you for showing so much interest, because I didn't know, I wasn't sure that was going to happen. I thought that the administration was going to succeed in sweeping it under the rug, because, oh, Lord knows they tried. They really did try. And back to what you were saying, that, you know, they kind of did the bare minimum when it came to punishment. There was really no punishment when it got down to it. They said, oh, okay, you know, we're gonna do this and that, so that on the outside, when parents heard about it, they go, oh, okay, you know, he learned his lesson. No, that person still has that mind, still has that way of thinking, just because, you know, you gave them a slap on the wrist. No, something else needs to happen, and the way that the administration handled it, what does that say to your kids? What does that say to adults, you know? That, oh, okay, I guess, you know, this isn't a big deal. So acting on it and, you know, going for it, going to the media, having forums like this are so important, because there is a very, I mean, I just graduated, so being in high school and hearing things and seeing things that that really scare me for the upcoming generation. The ignorance is so there that people don't even know what they're saying, and it's scary. It's very scary that when someone says something that's offensive, and they seriously don't know. It's insane, and it's very scary that, you know, there have been incidents like this in the past, and I'm sure none of you have heard about them. I'm sure this is the first one that you've heard about in our school, and there have been many, many other victims of this, unfortunately. So I kind of lost where I was going with that, because I read it, but thank you.
Thank you so much. I think one of the things that, and this is Dory, this is Hannah's mom, by the way, who I think, by the way, I think one of the things that was, and you were patient with me while I worked on this story. We talked in April, and we just wrote this story this past week, and it took some time because we wanted the process to play itself out for you. I felt, frankly, dealing with Student Matters, that we were fortunate that both of the students were through the system and graduated, because to me, in telling the story, it's not important who the person was who did this stuff, but it's important the experience that you had, again, going through it. So one of the things, Dory, that you shared with me was when this incident happened, Hannah had something happen to her. She was told, or the person who was identified, who took responsibility, was told, you want to say you're sorry, that's fine, but she's got to process this right now, so let her come to you and say, okay, let's talk about it, let her have the space for it. And the folks showed up on your doorstep within like 18 hours when you weren't necessarily prepared to receive them, but again, you received them. I think one of the things that we may not acknowledge when we don't understand why there is a question of victimization, and I don't like that word because I feel like it gives power to being hurt, but I feel like it is incumbent upon someone to whom things like this have happened to then have the good grace and dignity to receive the person who may have remorse not on their terms. Like it was not your way of choosing to have the conversation of I'm sorry at the time of your choosing, and yet you are still expected to say, well, you know, you did say you were sorry, so I guess that's something. I think we need to do better than that with people. Michelle, you probably know about processing, which is something we don't have time for anymore. We experience something, we need a hot take, we need a quick reaction. What do you think about that? We don't have a moment to let the thing that happened have happened and sit with us. And there's many instances of that, and I just work in the media, so I could tell you about it, but you all feel them. But I would just like, if you, and don't feel that you need to follow my remarks, but I think there's something to be said about having to be the bigger person, and why that is also unfair in a situation where you have already been the uninvolved person on the terms of which the discussion were started.
Hi, I'm Dory Fields. I'm the parent of Hannah. I have so much to say. For anyone who knows me, they would say, don't give her the microphone, this isn't a sleepover. And this would be the first one to say it. I have a lot I wish I could share with you. But someone shared something with me today, and I just feel it's appropriate to share it with you now. I grew up in a town that demographically could be Haddon Township, but it was in Ohio. And in the Midwest, you know, things move a little slower and they're very friendly, like here. But I moved here 5 months pregnant with Hannah as a single parent, as a single mother. And when I was looking for houses, I wasn't pregnant with Hannah yet, and so I wasn't even thinking about a school system or anything like that. But I looked at about 17 houses, and out of the 17 houses, I had to be conscious of the fact that when I went into someone's home and that I might potentially buy and shook their hand, whether I felt welcome in that home or not, to gauge whether or not I'd be welcome in this town. And I have to tell you that the majority of the time, by a vast majority, I knew I'd be safe here in this community. And I love this community, and it has shown to be faithful in that way. My family, my nearest family is 600 miles away. And yet my daughter has a large group of people that she refers to as her aunts and uncles, like Uncle Bill here, who rarely missed a performance that she had on the stage. But the thing that I would really like to speak to and share with is that I too am a Christian woman. I grew up in the Pentecostal church, apostolic. My grandmother was a missionary. And on my father's side. On my mother's side, she was, I think they modeled Granny Clampett after my mother's mother. They were hillbillies, gun-toting. I'm sorry that this couple left because I could speak to them about the BB gun situation. But sometimes when things happen to you, and you have to, in that moment of shock, you have to focus yourself on, I have to be very careful here, because whatever reaction that I have to that thing can cause a reaction throughout the community, throughout the world even. One person has had a reaction that has, created divisiveness throughout the world. And so sometimes God allows us to be crushed. That was the word that was shared with me. So that when our outer shell is broken, it can reveal what's inside. And what's inside can have an impact on the world or the people around you. And so, like Hannah, I thank God that we're in this situation where our shell was cracked, mostly her shell, because now we're sitting here looking in a position where we get to share what's inside. And what I love that we found out is that there was love there. There was even love there for the person that, that wrote the note and sent it out on the stage. And the disappointment that I had was not that he wasn't punished enough. The disappointment that I had was that the dialogue didn't happen of how we could heal that heart you spoke of, Reverend Alice, that we could heal that heart from the bitterness that was in there. In that moment, we had an opportunity. And, that's another thing that I just wanted to speak to. You said the church is a beacon of light in the community. And I've learned the most from you tonight, Mr. P. Flag, because, yes, the church is light. It's supposed to be the light. It's supposed to reflect Jesus. It's supposed to do that. But what happens is the church is full of people. And people are not God themselves. It's a choice to let God prevail in us. And so when people come in, we have the choice of accepting or rejecting them. And we find ourselves ignorantly rejecting them, because what the Bible does say is, judge not lest ye be judged. So unless we're perfect in every way, we should never condemn another man. And it also says, love your neighbor as yourself. We have no problem loving ourselves. Somebody offered me, a trip to the Caribbean and a massage. I have no problem with that. But would I give it up for somebody else that might need it more? That's a little, I gotta think about that. That's just basically what I wanted to share with you all. That I love you all for coming. I especially love the people who brought their young children out to hear the beginning of the conversation at a young age, and to let them, hear what people feel and how they think and how they, they didn't even know who was going to be here, and they just let their young children come and just hear what people think.
Well said, both of you. Thank you. Yeah.
Hey, Matt, real quick.
Please, go ahead.
I just like to say, one, I commend you and your daughter both for what you've done, and it's just like I said in my opening statement, we have to bring back that old Martin Luther King mentality, right? I mean, you could have very well, when that person showed up on your doorstep again, go. I'm not ready. I'm not, leave me, or go whatever, or have that hatred back. And I think that's what really what's happening is that, oh, you hate me, I'm going to hate you, and then it just keeps escalating from there. But you show them just the opposite, right? You say, come on in, let's talk, let's find out what actually happened, really get to know me, really understand what's going on, and that's that love, and that's that for you, and God has told us, right, you got to forgive. I mean, no matter what happened, you have to forgive, even that they could have done something really, but if you truly want to heal yourself, that's what has to happen, right? You have to be able to forgive that person for the wrong that they've done to you, and then you know what? It's on you. I'm good with it now, right? It's on you now. Now you have to figure out a way how to get back into the real world and figure out how do you commingle with other people. So I commend you for being a single parent, moving here, raising a beautiful lady who evidently is going to go on to do some really big things, and you can just tell by the way they speak and the way they go. So I really do commend you on that.
Please, yeah.
Hi. I have children in the school district as well. And one thing that troubled me that a lot of people might not know because it wasn't mentioned in the article is that the student, the offender, his father is a teacher in the school district. That is what bothers me as a parent more than anything, because as you were saying, this stems from home. This stems, what we teach our children. And this worried me for my child being taught by this individual, but I have to say that what's most important is what I teach my child and what she is going to take with her, even if she's being taught by this individual, and what she should be able to stand up for. So I believe that, things need to be changed in the school district, but that has to start within us, like you said, and our children. So I just wanted to make sure people understood that little fact.
Well, and I can tell you as the person who wrote the article and who was very careful about the framing of those little facts, that I felt, frankly, that any details that identified the person on the other end of this were going to be distracting from the larger point, which to me is the fact that it's not important who did what. It's not important why they meant it or didn't mean it. It's important what happened to the other person on the other end of it. And that's where I wanted the focus to be, and not to be conflated in details with people suggesting that there's another motivation behind telling the story of someone's experiences in the system. And that is why other more identifying information did not accompany it. But I hear where you're coming from, and I felt, we told it that way for a particular reason, which is to keep the focus on the process. Okay.
I think it was important for people in the room that has kids in the school district that they're aware of it. That it stems from a lot of people in the community that need teaching. It's scary to know that there's teachers out there that are raising children like this because they are human beings. But we as a community need to do more to address that, as not just so it doesn't keep happening.
There's parents of police officers, there's parents of teachers, there's parents of bosses of other human beings, there's parents of children of other people, and there's all kinds of people in any kind of circumstance. I recognize your point about the influence of education, but there are many other personal, smaller relationships with people who are not in an elected authority's role or not subject to the same public moral code as somebody in that who still have to deal with these questions too. So I would also say it goes to everybody regardless of profession, because these are the relationships we have one-on-one. And thank you for that. Please.
But I do think the school is a unique circumstance because, many kids see their teacher more than they see their parent at times. If you have a working parent, oftentimes kids are in the school building more than they have FaceTime with their own parent and their own family unit. So the schools really should reflect the values of the community. So it's important that we continue to clarify what our positions are as parents and community members, what we want the schools to accomplish in terms of educating our students. And if we do have people that we have concerns about, it's very important that we clarify what we expect of our teachers. I mean, I'm an educator, and I expect that my role and the objective of my job is routinely clarified, so I know this is this is your intended purpose, and it's expected to be fulfilled. And it's important to think about school as it's very unique, because again, these are adults that you're turning your children over to for 6 and 7 hours a day. And if there's, again, the microaggressions she referred to earlier, if there's people that are standing in front of your kids that have these unchecked biases day in and day out, and the kids are exposed to, it's important that as a district, the missed opportunity could be this is a time to pause and really reflect on, like, what's happening in our district and what are we missing? Because if this is the time that somebody got caught, but that means there's been many more. This has been going on for some time now, maybe in smaller ways, and this was the big one. But this has been happening. So it is a missed opportunity, and it's a time to pause and reflect on, what are the goals and objectives of our school system? Are we educating citizens? Are we just, funneling kids through a machine to get them to graduate and kick them out into the world without helping them, digest information and act on it in a really meaningful way? So maybe, again, what's our takeaway from talking? Because we can talk a lot, but we have to do something, right? So maybe as community members you think, in September we need a critical mass of people to go to a board meeting and say, our understanding is that there's been, circumstances of bias, and we as a community think that something needs to be done, and here's what we expect, and what do you propose? And you can't give up. This has to be an ongoing conversation, because these are things that have been happening over time, and it's going to take some time to fix it, but it's got to be something that's continually addressed. Well, I think it's definitely a matter of, if the goal is, to me, is changing minds. That's what we need to do. Whether or not this guy's fired or not, he's still going to go out in the world and behave in the same kind of way. So the goal is to change minds, and how do we do that? And that's through regular dialogue, checking in, supporting people and checking themselves, because not everybody knows how to do that, to really think about their own thinking and consider where they're coming from. But a starting point is, talking about race, talking about diversity, making sure our curriculum reflects the population at large, and it's not just, the same old, kind of history that doesn't reflect who we are as a nation. So this can happen at multiple points along the way, but it starts with acknowledging the problem, which it sounds like it's not a problem that's long been acknowledged.
But it does also sound like there is some acknowledgement from what I hear, that there are people who are interested in finding ways appropriately to acknowledge it. Did I see a hand over here? Yeah, please.
Thank you. I'm looking at my notes so I stay on track, but I'll try to make it quick. So first, my name is Sean Brown. I live in Camden. And when I was watching the news a few years ago, and we see this issue of police brutality with often a white cop shooting and killing an unarmed young black man, my theory, maybe I'm wrong, is that really awakened our country on race relations, and it really started a conversation even well beyond what the presidential election in 2008 did. But beyond that, one of the things that I talked to, as you said, calling people out that sometimes deny that racism exists and it's not a real thing, is that for every time that there's a camera capturing this cop doing something that's wrong, there are places where there are no cameras. So there are hiring managers who are skipping past the resume of a black sounding name, of a Tasha or Quayshawn, because of the sound of the name, despite the qualifications of that person. And there's a lot of research that supports that this is something that happens. There are loan officers that skip past ethnic minorities because of either where they live or where they're trying to move, despite their credit and the fact that they have a down payment. So when someone mentioned earlier that this town and a lot of other towns in South Jersey and throughout America are 95% white, in part it's not because minorities don't have an interest in moving there, it's because they can't qualify for a loan because of institutional racism and redlining that still occurs in the financial institutions in America. So we have, and you asked a good question, like, what do we do about it? And I definitely think that electing the right people is a start. But in my experience in dealing with the government and politics, it definitely has to go beyond that, and making sure that this is something Freeholder Young probably realized the first time he met me, is that we have to be willing to get into our elected officials' faces and have difficult or uncomfortable conversations with them and let them know what the issue of the day is, and get a position from them and hold them accountable to those conversations, because they do have special access and special powers that often the rest of us don't have. So I just wanted to just to add a little bit, just remind us that there are pockets of these things all throughout society.
Thank you. I saw some other hands going up too. Folks, yeah, please.
I just want to say, you mentioned what you can do, and I'm not sure the specifics of the case of what happened, but it sounds to me like the principal did what he thought the community would want him to do. And so you as a community have to stay on his case and let him know that what he did was wrong. And I guess eventually get him fired or whatever, but he obviously did what he thought his neighbors and parents would want him to do. He was wrong, and you have to let him know that by going to school board meetings and putting him on blast every chance you get. You were wrong. This is not how we want our school to be. So that's my advice to solving the problem. He obviously got the wrong idea about being the principal.
Thank you. Here.
Thanks. I think what's really interesting that happens, so I work with teachers. All my teachers are new teachers in Camden, predominantly don't match the color, black or brown, of our students. And one of the things that constantly happens as I work with predominantly white teachers is we tend to isolate the people that we think are doing wrong and say, I'm not like them, I'm not racist, I don't say that stuff, I don't do that, they're the bad guys, let's fire them, let's do that. And we don't actually look inside to recognize that we've all breathed the same air, we've all lived in the smog that Beverly Tatum talks about, and that we exist in racism and it has been internalized, whether you're white, whether you're black, wherever you are. And I think what's so dangerous, and I think about this a lot as a white woman, is when it's so easy for us to say, let's hold you accountable by having you lose your job, your livelihood, but that actually doesn't get to the root of the issue, which is the fact that that person doesn't know. There's a level of ignorance that needs to change, and that change comes through dialogue, through conversation. And it's not the conversation of, you did something wrong, in my opinion. It's actually I need to tell you why I feel deeply that the path that you went is wrong. Let's talk about how we collectively can fix it and can make a better path, because I think so often we want that person to be hung out to dry. We separate ourselves. We distance ourselves because we don't want to be associated with that. But in all honesty, how often are we looking inside to recognize that we hold biases that we unintendedly send out to the world at all times? And so one of the things that I'm trained to do is actually sit in rooms like this and understand the microaggressions that come out. And it's so fascinating that even in a space like this where intentions are so pure, those unintended biases infiltrate our conversation. And I just think, one, it's so powerful to be in this space together, but two, unless we start calling out how those things actually exist in this space, in this very moment, we leave and we don't recognize that we did it. And so, bear with me, I'm gonna share a couple observations that I made, because to me, these are really important things if we're gonna actually shift the way we operate when we leave the space. And some of these are race, gender, equity. But one, the first three people, Matt, that you called to the front were all three men on the panel, and the gender dynamic that plays out, and what that means in society. I'm just stating an observation. I think another thing that I have noticed is our talking about our faiths, which is really beautiful, but we also have noticed that we're only representing a few faiths in this room that aren't across the spectrum of our community. And I could keep going, but that's not the point. I think it's just that if I don't, coming from what I do every day, if I don't name them, it's the silence that lets us continue to not know that we make those mistakes or make those unintended biases come to life and into a room. So.
I appreciate that, because when we sat down, I can't remember which, did David, you say that we're sitting in boy-girl order? And that was just the way that people started sitting down next to each other. So even though, or Freeholder Young, when you're speaking about the guy, are you renting or are you owning? There is another dynamic, there's another aspect of the conversation or the experience that carries this charge that you're speaking about. And I think that that's certainly part of it, and The one piece I wanted to add on when we talk about people losing their jobs for the mistakes that they make, the unintended consequence of that also is that it doesn't make people more willing to acknowledge a mistake. It makes them more willing to cover it up because they think everything is going to cost them their job. So they will do whatever they can because they feel backed into a corner. So again, those kinds of zero-sum, high-stakes, everything that we do is a big piece of it. And I just wanted to make mention of that again. But thank you.
Matt, we were promised an uncomfortable conversation, and I am really disappointed. This has been way too comfortable. There's so much goodwill in the room. I'm really, no, I don't think we need to get flagrant about it. But Morgan here came as close as anyone has to making it uncomfortable in a very important way, and I really appreciate what she had to say, because even with all the goodwill in this room, we are always the creatures of our biases, whatever they are. And I know you have a lot of teaching colleagues, and I was just at a conference in Washington with 600 educators, and most of us came from community colleges, and I looked around that room and realized that we didn't in any way represent the demographics of the schools we all teach in. So we're sending a message all the time that that privileged white people are the authority figures that are going to teach everybody else how to act and how to be and how to think. I guess it comes down to the question of why we always, despite our best intentions, separate ourselves into camps. When Black Lives Matters first appeared on the scene, it was clear, at least as clear as it can be to an old white guy like me, what the impulse behind that was, and I loved it and respected it. But how long did it take before Blue Lives Matter came out as a deliberate, obvious reaction that was antagonistic to Black Lives Matter? And then we had to be subjected to All Lives Matter. And I love all of them. I love Black Lives Matter, and I love Blue Lives Matter, and I love All Lives Matter, but I'm not black, and I'm not blue, and I'm not queer, and I'm not female, and I'm not so many things. All I am is All Lives Matter. But if you had to choose one, we'd probably all be able to choose one, and that's frightening to me, that we can all pick one to say, that one represents me better than the others represent me. No matter which one it is, it creates a camp. Even All Lives Matter means something very, very powerful and meaningful and antagonistic to Black Lives Matter. It means, yeah, please, would you like to tell me what it means? Here's what it means to me. It means stop making everybody else the enemy. It means stop standing up for yourself. It means stop making this your life's work. It means, come on, we're better than that. We don't owe you anything. It means all of that. And it's just, until we get past that knee-jerk reaction that the white folks in the audience have more to answer for than anybody else does, we're going to have to keep having conversations like this. Was that uncomfortable enough?
You know, and to speak on the Black Lives Matter thing for a second, you know, there's a unwritten word or unsaid word that follows that, and it's two, right? And that's what the real message is. The real message is not that we're saying that, hey, I matter more than you. I'm letting you know I matter also, all right? Because again, if you look around and you see what's going on, and we all talk about numbers and we talk about everything that's going on, you know, I mean, there are more African American males and females, all right, or people in general, African American people, who are killed by the hands of officers than there are any other race, okay? And why is that? Why is that, right? Is it the fact that now that we've had a couple bad apples, really stole the whole bunch of what the police force is. I love my police force. I truly believe that they're a necessity. I also believe that you have some wolves in sheep's clothing that have that mentality. There was just a thing on the internet the other day where you had a guy and he had a purple robe and he goes, it was African American, he's going around and he's interviewing all the KKK, right, which they say doesn't exist anymore, the whole KKK thing. And he goes around and he actually gets memorabilia from the Ku Klux Klan where he goes. And he's got this one, he's got the purple robe hanging up. And the robe, right, the purple means that you're the grand dragon, you're the big dog of it all. And then he takes the robe off of the hanger, and underneath of it was a Baltimore police officer's uniform because his full-time job was a police officer. So that's where you get to that. And then when you start about accountability, when you start talking about things, when this Black Lives Matter movement really took off and took spur, enough is enough, one. Two, all we're looking for is justice. All we're looking for is somebody to tell me why me as a black man sitting there with a police officer, at one point, pretty decent conversation, and at the next point, I got a sheet over top of my head. And it's plain as day. It's on TV. It's on film. Everybody sees it. But nothing's ever done about it. That's when the movement really took over and really started to take off. And it could have really been handled much better, and this movement wouldn't be so crazy as people think it really is if the justice system just would have did their job. So how far does it go, right? So you think about it, you say, okay, well, the police officer himself has got to be something wrong with him, but then his boss covers it up, then a prosecutor covers it up, and then the judge doesn't do anything about it. So how deep does it go? How far does this racism actually go within this system? And that's really something to think about. So when we talk about, you know, it's not just about firing, it's not just about, you know, hey, let's find out if this guy can, if we can help him. And I agree with you. They need some help. They need some psychological help, and something needs to be done. But when it's embedded in you, and when it's taught to you as a child, and remember we talked about that ages from 6 to 12-year-olds is the most important time of a child. Well, now you're embedding that evil and that racism in them at that age. They have no other choice. It's the same way when we talk about the urban settings and what happens to the urban settings, right? It's the same way, and I truly believe, listen, I believe in public assistance and I believe in all that, but it's a failed system. It's a failed system because the government allowed an individual to get dependent on them to live every day. Think about that. Think about that. What's the difference between an African American male, female, successful person and a person who didn't make it? What's the difference? You got two paths. And I look at life this way here. You're walking down the street. You got two individuals. One individual decides to stay straight and go this way here. It's all lights, it's all glamour, it's all glitz. You can see exactly what's going on. You see exactly what's happening in your life. You can see the future happening right in front of you. You got the same another individual, makes a right turn, goes down the dark road, has no idea what's going to happen, right? Has no vision of what's going to, so they get stuck into that thing. But the great part about life is there's side streets back to the good side. And that's why we talked about earlier when we talked about foundation and how you treat your kids and what you teach your kids. Listen, ain't no doubt in my mind that as you grow up and as you teach a kid, they're going to stray. They're going to, hey, let me see if the beer tastes better over here. Let me see what's going on over here, right? They're going to stray. They're going to do that. But that faith and that foundation that you build for that child, they will come back home and they will do the right thing. So if you teach a child wrong, he'll be wrong for the rest of his life. So those important years, those first initial years, right there, that age right there, so cute, that age right there, that's where the importance comes in at. That's where the lesson is learned. That's what we have to be able to go out and teach our youth. Because the roads that we pave today, if we don't teach them the right thing to do, it's no good.
Please teach me the right thing to do.
So that's it. Please go.
I think there's truth to what you're saying, but also it's very important for people not to think that it's a kind of a bootstrap mentality that everybody can kind of just make a series of great decisions and things are going to work out for them, because that's not. I've worked in the city for a really long time, and I see people. There's a lot of swimming upstream going on, and there's multiple systems acting on people simultaneously, and all those systems acted on me, but it worked. They worked for me. My father's a veteran. We received supports and services because of disabilities, but it all worked. And the systems work for me, and systems don't work for everybody in the same kind of way. So it's not that everybody's, kind of a function of lack of decision making. You know what I mean? Like, not everybody is where they are because they didn't make all the right decisions. It's that sometimes there's circumstances and variables that they have no control over.
Sometimes it's just a lack of experience, which is why I think we're here today,
Right.
is because you can't ask the question you don't know to ask sometimes.
Well, it's also that, so parents sometimes don't, so I have a lot of parents that don't, they don't engage with school a lot, and school people know this. It's not always because they don't want to, they don't know how to. They don't know how to engage with the school in a meaningful way that affects change. But then the assumption is that parent doesn't care. And that's an assumption we have about a low-income parent, that they don't care. It's just, oftentimes they don't know how to demonstrate that love and concern in a meaningful way that exacts change for their kid. They know how to walk into an office and be judged a lot because they didn't get there on time. They know how to be judged that they don't have clean clothes on because it's a uniform policy, but it's hard to, wash uniforms in a laundromat. I have a hard time doing my laundry in my washer and dryer's in the house. So if you have to gather up your kids' clothes and go to the laundromat several times a week, it's hard. There's a lot of variables acting on people that make it really difficult to rise above your circumstances. But I just don't want to take away from anybody's struggle, saying that if only they would, make a series of choices, then things would be different for them. And maybe they would in some ways, but there's a lot of ways in which institutions are impacting people negatively. Housing is a huge one. It's one of those things that kind of flies under the radar because you don't see it, and people do it while they're smiling. You know what I mean? Like, sorry, this is just not going to work out for you. And there's not real clear ways to pinpoint, to say, yeah, I think you didn't approve me because of this, that, and the other thing. How can you prove that? But it exists. And those kinds of policies and practices are keeping people from accessing, that upward mobility. That who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want a better life for their kids and for their family? But there's a lot of these kind of insidious policies that exist that, I don't really know how to change the policy, these policies and practices that banks have. They need to change, but they're really insidious, and they really affect how well people can rise above. And to me, that bootstrap mentality is really, it's a myth for a lot of people, and it's inaccessible.
I have to just wrap up because we're up against the clock here. So I would just like to sum up, David, just to piggyback on your point. I think there are a lot of people who have a hard time looking in the mirror and coming up with something as simple as my life matters before they can even get to the place of your life matters. I don't know how we fix that. I don't know how we start doing that. It's hard to acknowledge the humanity in other people when you don't feel it for yourself, or you don't feel like you matter or you are part of the system. But I just want to thank everybody for coming out, and I want to make a couple of really important thank yous on camera so that we can make sure that we thank the people who put this together. We're lucky enough to have Mr. Steve McFadden from Revolution Coffee over there. He put the coffee out there. We don't get a lot of good conversations without coffee. I think that's an important thing. And then the food was from Silver Spoon of Haddon Township. That's a Haddon Township business. Dennis Kelly and Jill Kelly right there on Haddon Avenue. They do catering. They did a great job with this. That was donated. If you're hearing me, if you're watching this at home, there's a guy back there called Jay Mage. He's a Collingswood guy. He's got a studio called MageWorks. Jay is here today. Jay helped us become more media as a media company, and I'm here as the representative of a website called njpen.com. And I just want to throw out the one thing I'll say is we are an independent online publication. That means two things. One, we don't print a newspaper, so I don't have a place I can tell you to go buy my news someplace. It really relies on individual people saying, I'm willing to at least pay as much as I pay for Netflix so that you can keep doing this, because I think some of these things are important that you're doing. I hope people feel that way. I hope you'll become a subscriber, because the library donated this room. Jay is giving us a real good break on his rate, and the food was provided. These people are not compensated. You didn't get anything, as far as I know, for coming here, except maybe a cup of coffee. But it really happens that we can have these kinds of things if we as a community step up and say, this is where I want to live, this is where what I want to live looks like, these are the people I'm going to live next to and with, and we are going to do this in a good way. And I do want to acknowledge that we've been talking a lot about stuff that happened in this zip code, but this is not a collection of zip codes that life stops and starts. We are all neighbors. We are in a broader context, and it does behoove me to acknowledge Commissioner John Foley from Haddon Township came here. Thank you, please, for showing up. I appreciate that very much. And that matters. So I want to thank again Freeholder Jonathan Young, school psychologist Michelle Messer, David Snyder from the Jewish Human Relations Council, Reverend Alice Cook from the United Methodist Church, Rhodes United Methodist Church in Sadlertown, Jim D. Simone from Collingswood PFLAG. Thank you, and thank you everybody for being here, and hopefully we'll do some more of this sometime soon. Appreciate it. David, I think